Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the last session of the Exploring Legal Futures webinars. It's so very lovely to see so many of you here today. So my name is Maria, and I'm the Outreach, One Participation and Communications Coordinator here at the Faculty of Law. And today I am joined by three wonderful panelists where we'll let introduce themselves in a little bit. And the theme of our session today is non-legal career pathways for law graduates. So people who have studied law have gone on to do a whole range of different things. Before I let our lovely panelists introduce themselves, just a couple of housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded and it will be uploaded on the faculty's YouTube channel, so you can watch it back whenever you like. In terms of questions, we've got quite a few pre-submitted questions, so thank you so much for whoever submitted those, all of you that submitted those. But we will also be taking live questions. So if you do have questions throughout the session, please do put them in the Q&A box that you can find at the bottom of your screen. You don't have to wait until the end. You can put your questions at any point throughout the session, and we will address them either when we're speaking about something relevant or at the end after we address pre-submitted questions. So please, whatever you've got to ask, our panelists will be super happy to answer it. So put it in the box at the bottom of your screen. But without further ado, if I let our lovely panelists introduce themselves, so maybe they can tell us a little bit about what their name is, who they are, what they're doing, and very briefly a little bit about how they got there. So if I start with Caroline.
Hello, I'm Caroline Kenyon, and I'm founder of the Food Awards Company. I would say that I'm a serial entrepreneur, and that's not something that I ever expected to be when I was your age and thinking about going to university and hoping that it might be Cambridge. I thought I was going to be a barrister, and particularly a criminal barrister, and save the world. So I arrived at Cambridge. I was at Key's to do 3 years of law. And I was, in all honesty, a little bit overwhelmed by it. I'd never been away from home before. It was still a very male college. It had only been mixed for a couple of years, and learning a whole new subject seemed quite a lot. So I did something which I hadn't known about at school, which is called the split tripos. So I did 1 year of languages, which I felt comfortable in, and then I did 2 years of like a compressed law degree, and then I went to bar school. I was excited about the idea of going to the bar, but law and I don't think we were really made for each other. I think it's a fantastic profession for the right people. And I deferred my pupillage for a year, thinking I'll think about it and then I'll come back. And during that year, I decided I wasn't going to be a lawyer. So I didn't exactly start out thinking I will do a law degree and then I won't be a lawyer, but I found my way to it. And then I became a journalist and a magazine editor. And then I moved out of London to the countryside and I set up my own public relations agency. And then that morphed over the years into the Food Awards Company. And I now run a global food photographic awards. So it's been a zigzag journey. I've loved it all. I couldn't enjoy what I do now more than I do. It's amazing. I feel completely fulfilled. And I'm so glad I did law at Cambridge. It's really informed a lot of my life. So I'm looking forward to sharing a lot of that with you later.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Caroline. And then should we move on to Andy?
Yep. Hi everyone. My name is Andy McGowan. So I studied Trinity Hall from 2007 to 2010. So I currently work for a national charity called Carers Trust. I work in their policy team. So I work on a variety of policy areas, but particularly in relation to sort of something called young carers, so children supporting sort of family members because of illness and disability. So a lot of my work is working in Westminster, working with MPs, their teams, members of the House of Lords, civil servants, but also working sort of other organisations like local authorities, schools, etc. as well. So when I started university, I was one of the probably the rare people who had actually studied law before. So I studied A-level law alongside sort of politics and English, and I chose law because I just really enjoyed studying it. I really got the buzz for it. Didn't really know whether I wanted to go into a career in law. When I sort of started and was doing it, I realised that if I was to go into law, it would either be similar to Caroline in terms of criminal law or potentially family law. But in terms of when I was I did a couple of work experiences during my time, particularly during my second year, and found I just didn't really have that buzz in terms of actually sort of going in to do it. And also being quite honest, because of the areas of law I was interested in, it meant that financially being able to get into those would be particularly challenging from that sense. So a lot of my friends went off and got training contracts at big commercial law firms who paid for their sort of next stage of their training, and the salaries would be sort of significantly higher upon starting. Whereas my own position, so I was the first in my family to go to university, neither of my parents sort of worked because of disability from that sense. So for me, it was one where it would be a very big financial outlay personally to be able to go and do it. So instead, actually, I made the decision I wanted to get more into influencing the law rather than practicing the law. And so in terms of I've been started in the voluntary sector, working for sort of carers charities and doing some of their local sort of policy work. And then I've worked my way over the years to now this sort of national policy role. So that's a bit about my journey, and I look forward to talking about a bit more about it as we go through the session.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Andy. And finishing off with Tom.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, everyone. Great to be here, and really looking forward to this discussion. I'm Tom Hogg. Currently my title is Senior Student Support Manager at King's College London, another university, where I act as a safeguarding officer and welfare lead for one of the faculties of the university. So my role at the moment consists of being a point of escalation for any safeguarding concerns and helping drive a kind of a more positive culture of well-being and safety for students at that university. I've been in that role now for about 18 months. Prior to that, and since graduating, having done law, graduating in 2016, I was a social worker within children's services across a number of different local authorities. I still am a registered social worker, and that's something I intend to keep going with and keep training in. Yeah, I guess for me, I like everyone here, I studied law between 2013 and 2016. I was really interested in how things worked, why we do things in certain ways, kind of really focused in on the social side of law. I was less interested in the kind of commercial property side of law, politics, history, which I think really fueled my desire to kind of in a certain way. So yeah, I really did enjoy my study of law. I thought it was super helpful to get a lot of really good analytical skills and sort of get that deeper understanding of the systems that we create and why we do things, why we can't do certain things. I did intend, I think, when I started university, to become a barrister or a solicitor. I think more so towards being a barrister. I think like the other two panelists, I was really interested in like criminal law, family law. I did my dissertation on the Mental Health Act, for instance. I did some like shadowing, like mini pupilages with a couple of barristers in sort of after my second year, I think it was. And I'll be honest, I found it a little bit boring. And I think that for me was the kind of the awakening of like, oh, is this really what I want to go into? And I think similar, being honest, like Andy, I think similarly that those areas of law, I was kind of quite concerned about the financial aspect. So I started looking kind of further afield at different things that kind of piqued my interest, that had that kind of social aspect to it. And yeah, I came across a relatively new graduate scheme called Frontline that is similar to the likes of Teach First, that can train people into becoming social workers. And I sort of fully intended to do that for a couple of years, get a bit of life experience behind me, get support with a bursary and get a qualification in something, and maybe go back into law with that sort of first-hand experience of working with children and families. But yeah, almost 9 years later, that never happened. So yeah, very pleased to have been a social worker, and yeah, looking forward to being able to tell you more about what I think the law degree has brought me in this profession, and why I'd encourage anyone to look at this profession as well. So yeah, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Tom. Yeah, and you said 9 years, and I was just thinking, no, it's surely not been 9 years, but apparently it has. So you touched quite a lot on deciding not to do law and the work experience that you did, and sort of when you took that decision that law might not be for me, and the aspects of law that maybe were not for you. So I think that's really useful, and I'd quite like to hear the same from Andy and Caroline, maybe. So, what was the sort of moment that you said, actually, I'm not interested in law, and what were the aspects of the work experience or the internships that you were doing that were not that it just didn't interest you this much? It could be, a point in time or multiple points in time, maybe starting with Andy and then Caroline.
Yeah, I think for me, there's a couple of moments. I think, as I said, I didn't do sort of formal sort of vac schemes from that sense, just because I was sort of inclined that actually I wasn't that interested. So I did a couple of small sort of work experiences through some sort of local, and just sort of like the odd 1 or 2 day things. And I just realized that actually, for me, from my perspective, what I was doing wasn't what I saw necessarily as law. I saw it more in my head as actually more like business. And actually, I was just like, that's not the area that I'm particularly interested in from that sense. And so, could I see myself going and committing to do it? Because the only way I could fund doing in terms of training contract, etc., would be to go through a sort of commercial scheme. And I was like, actually, will I enjoy that? And some of my friends did go into doing that route with a view that they would go into family law or criminal law or something in the future. I think in fairness, the vast majority of them haven't ended up there. Either potentially because they've actually found, yeah, actually once they're doing it, they're really enjoying it. Or the other side is once you're in a career, actually then taking a massive sort of difference pay wise to go into some of the other areas of law is much harder than it sounds in theory. About say, oh, it's fine, I'll do that and I'll switch. So I think for me, it was just saying it didn't feel like actual law. And I was always much more interested in some of that, the politics side and how we influence law and what is the purpose of law from that sense. What are we trying to achieve? What are the wrongs that we're trying to right, etc. And so I think my interest in sort of politics was a real factor in that. And that sort of determined actually for me, that was a route I knew I sort of wanted to go down with more to helping to influence the law of the future rather than actually sort of practicing it as well. I think if in a different world, if there were sort of fully funded schemes to go and study criminal law and practice, then it may have been a different story. But I think that was just the reality I was in and just where my interests lay, really. So
Yeah, absolutely. And what about you, Caroline? Because I think you've mentioned quite a few similar things and
Yes,
experiences.
it wasn't so much that I didn't find law interesting. Um, and I will be honest, it's hard. So I don't want to kind of lead anybody to think that studying law at Cambridge is not difficult. There are reasons why when you get on the other side and you're in the big wide world and people say, what did you do? And you say, I read law at Cambridge, go, wow. It's a seriously hardcore course and it pushes you intellectually very hard. Um, I I'm very much a people person, so some of the subjects I found a bit dry. Like I'm not going to say contract law because actually contracts are about people, but some aspects of it, international law and so on, or the law of trusts. Actually, that was at bar school. Gosh, that was dry. But it wasn't. It didn't kind of make you feel sort of exhilarated and uplifted, and that you'd learned more about the world. But for me, the reason why I didn't pursue a career at the bar was really, to be absolutely honest, because I'm a very emotional person, that I just realized that dealing with people who either had perpetrated dreadful crimes or been victims of terrible crimes, that I just wasn't strong enough for that. And that was very personal to me. I don't have strong enough boundaries to be able to exclude people's pain and suffering. So that was a really big factor for me. But I did learn so much from it. I mean, I learned huge amounts of mental discipline, to be able to absorb massive amounts of information fast and distill it down, really concentrate it. And actually, I loved doing my finals thesis, and I did it on surrogate motherhood and in vitro fertilization, which was then very, very novel technology. And it was very, it was about ethics, and that was really intellectually exciting. So I've no regrets about doing it whatsoever. I draw a lot of skills that I use now in running my business from all those years ago. But I think all three of us would agree that it's good to know when the career is not for you.
And if I can just quickly add on to that, I think all what you said there, Caroline, just around in terms of that sort of that flexibility around some of the modules that you did from that perspective, I think that was a factor for me. I know a lot of my friends, when they were choosing their sort of third year modules, for a number of them, they weren't forced to choose particular ones, but because of where they were sort of aiming to go and because of what they were wanting to go into, a number of them took commercial law module, took in terms of further international law because they're sort of applying to firms that had international offices, international bases, etc. Whereas for me, it gave me that flexibility. So I was able to do criminology, sentencing, and the penal system, for example. I was able to do. So my dissertation was on the legal framework relating to young carers because that was my area of interest at that time as well. And it just gave me that flexibility to do what I really wanted to do. And I think that made a massive difference because completely agree, Caroline, the law degree, it's intense. There's a lot of reading, there's a lot of stuff, and actually being able to do subjects I was interested in would have made a massive difference. I think I'd have really struggled to do some of the modules in terms of if I'd have been not forced to, but felt I sort of had to give myself a much better chance of getting into a top commercial law firm by doing the various different modules, which would have been extremely relevant from that sense. So.
Mm. Yeah, that's a really useful point as well, actually, thinking about sort of the degree itself and the freedom you've got when you've not, and that, I mean, you don't have an next step, you don't have something to qualify for, that actually kind of opens up the door with a law degree. Which I suppose, yeah, something that we do want to pass through this session, and we'll talk about that a bit later, is it is worth doing a law degree for the sake of doing a law degree. It's worth doing a law degree for the skills and the interest you get. It doesn't always have to be a stepping stone on the way to being a commercial solicitor or a criminal barrister or whatever it might be. So, but we'll talk about that in a second. Something else I want to talk about is obviously we sort of discussed experience and internships and all of that relating to law, but how did you end up getting an interest in the careers you did end up doing? Did you have positions in student committees? Did you attend careers fairs and you thought, oh my gosh, actually I really like food awards, or being a social worker or really like working with young carers, or what did you do sort of in university and in the first few years after graduating that led you to kind of your career path, the people you met or the experiences you sort of undertook? Maybe if we start with Tom, was that kind of more recent, I guess?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, what did I do at university? I guess, I mean, like I said, I think in my third year, I went to like a careers event where Frontline were talking. So I think that was like a big moment where I was kind of opened up to, oh, there's a way into this career route. But I think things that I did at university, I was the access officer of my college's students union. So I was kind of leading like residentials and trips to different schools to kind of try and dispel some of those myths and kind of encourage wider participation. So I think being part of that kind of, that role and that kind of conversation within the college, I think continued my interest in sort of ideas of social justice and supporting people in less privileged positions, which again was kind of aligned with becoming a social worker. But I think the law degree itself, like doing family law in particular, there was a lot there about the Children Act and the role of local authorities and the rights of parents and families. So getting into that really again fueled my sort of interest and made me think, could I get involved with this from a non-legal perspective? Could I be involved in this kind of realm of conversation and discussion somewhere else, whether it's in policy or in practice within social work, for instance? So yeah, I'd say the kind of the students union stuff I think was a big thing. And yeah, I think that's the main one really. Yeah.
Mhm. I mean, the reason I'm doing this job is also because I was an access officer back at my college. So that's why the word student union always comes back to my head, because I was an access officer back at Cambridge, and I feel like that kind of led to me being interested in outreach and wider participation. So I feel like every time I ask people, it kind of naturally comes to me, oh, weren't you in a student union? Which most people weren't, but my own experience was that. So what about you, Andy, then? What were kind of your university experiences?
Yeah, I was involved in a wide range of stuff when I was at university. So similarly, I was the access officer at my college. I was then was elected as one of the sabbatical officers to be the access officer at the Students' Union as well. So I had that real interest in that sort of social mobility side. I was involved in one of the ambassador program that the university was running. So I had a real interest in that sort of equality of opportunity, that sort of inequality piece from that perspective as well. But I was also interested in other stuff as well. So ranging from sort of the Law Society, I was on the sort of June event committee from that perspective, where I was a legal officer on that committee. So I sort of had that interest in sort of wide ranging things. But then as it was that real inequality piece and sort of widening opportunities sort of area that I sort of was interested in. So when I first graduated, my first role was actually running a sort of an apprenticeship program for a sort of a company across the region, because actually there were lots of their employees who just weren't having the same opportunities because they didn't have their GCSEs, their English, their maths, etc. And so I was doing that, and then got involved in some of the sort of the carers work in terms of through sort of voluntary sector organisation there. So yeah, but I think a lot of those sort of skills, that's the great thing about a university, is actually there's a whole range of opportunity you can get involved with, no matter what degree you do from that perspective as well. And so I think I found that lots of my friends who did law, there wasn't one size fits all. They did a whole range of different things, whether it's sports, whether it's politics, whether it's debating as well. Just there's a whole range of options where you can develop different skill sets to go alongside and really complement what you do in your academic degree. I've seen one of the questions we'll go on to later, is it, do I do law or do I do something else if I want to become a lawyer as well? But
I will say it's not a necessity to be an access officer to go into different non-legal careers. I don't know how this has happened. This was not on purpose. But yes, no, it's not a requirement. You don't have to be an access officer, but it's lovely if any of you end up doing it in the future. What about you, Caroline?
Well, I was co-founder of a college magazine at Keys. So I can see that my journalistic media communications instincts were pretty strong already at 18. And we had a lot of fun producing a magazine. I think we thought we were the editors of Private Eye. I mean, some of it really was quite funny, actually, but I think we thought it was more funny than it was. But that was great experience, just to literally create a magazine out of nothing. And you just have those opportunities. And also I do remember that in the long vac, that's the summer holidays, which is a very long period, because you sort of exams are all over by the end of May, everybody's gone by early June, and nobody reappears until late September, early October. But in that particular summer holidays, if you were going to do law in year 2, having done something else in year 1, you had to spend your whole summer in Cambridge doing law, feeling very sorry for yourself. And I had another friend who was doing the same, and then a third friend who was changing from French and Spanish to Arabic. So the three of us had long summer evenings, kind of knowing that we had lots of homework to do, but not wanting to do it. And we actually came up with the idea of creating a What's On guide to Cambridge, which we published, and we got advertising, and we did all the listings. I mean, this is, dare I say, this is before the internet. So it was in the 80s. And Graham, who's one of the three of us, we called it OCG Enterprise, Olivia, Caroline and Graham. Graham is now the Member of Parliament for Beverley in Yorkshire, and has a magazine company which he grew out of our What's On listing. So he started his business from that long vac, long summer evenings, thinking, what are we going to do? So I do realize that there's a lot of experience that I had then, aged 18, 19, 20, has stood me in really good stead now.
Absolutely. Definitely need to invite Graham in the future to speak to one of these. So I think what is important to get away from this is really try and get involved in a series of different things. Go to careers fair, talk to people, follow your interests. Even if your interests are journalism or sports or music, you never know which ones of these avenues will actually end up being a professional career or a pathway that you're really interested in and happy in. So, do all these things. And if you are a law student who's feeling a little bit lost and who's thinking, gosh, I'm not actually sure I want to go into law, the best way to figure it out is actually by trying out different things. And some of them will work out, some of them might not work out, but you are trying and you're seeing what you're interested in. So that's kind of what I wanted to ask all the panelists, what they did. But something that we have already kind of touched on, but I really think we should focus on is, why should I do a law degree if I'm not going into a legal career? What skills and experiences did all of our panelists gain from doing a law degree that they're applying to the current careers? And would you recommend a law degree to somebody who is basically certain that they don't want to go into a legal career, or certain to an extent. I suppose you can never be certain at the age of 18. So if we start maybe with Andy, I'm trying to switch it around.
Yeah, no, absolutely. In terms of if I was asked the question, would I go back and do a law degree again if I had the choice to applying from that sense? Absolutely. I think there's a couple of reasons. I think the skills that I've got have massively set me up and helped me in the work I'm doing now. I think one of the key ones that you get is an absolute eye for detail and attention to detail. So that actually the work that I'm doing within policy, the specific wording you use makes a massive difference as to what then is a requirement in law, or in terms of something as simple as must versus should or versus may. Simple words make a massive difference in terms of what happens there. And I think it's through that, Caroline also mentioned earlier, being able to absorb and not be intimidated by large sort of sets of documents, I think makes a real difference as well. So for me, in terms of when government releases policy papers, they're often 150 pages long. I'm not phased by that because I'm used to sort of working through those and say, right, what are the key bits? What does this mean? What does this mean for the audience I'm working with and needing to explain this to? I think that's a massive skill set I didn't have before doing my law degree. So I think that's something I've really taken away from this, but also how being able to construct an argument, whether that's verbally or in writing, and just really understood that actually how you convey your argument makes a massive difference around your chances of success. So I work with a range of organizations in my work. There are some organizations, particularly grassroots ones, where they're saying the same thing as me, but because of the way they're doing it, the approach they're choosing to use makes a massive difference as to how successful and how much they're able to link in. So I think for me, in terms of both in my professional work, but also wider. So I'm on my residents association in my area. And for example, there's been an issue recently around a business and parking. But actually, because I had that wherewithal to think, actually, when they applied for that, they would have got planning permission. Right, let's look at the planning permission documents. What did they say? What was the specific wording? That has meant actually that is now being overturned, which again, if I didn't have that ability to go through all of the 50 planning documents, scouring what does it mean, what does it not mean, I probably wouldn't have got that outcome. So I think for me, yeah, there's a lots of benefits, but also I really enjoyed it. I think doing a law degree is a really varied sort of course because there are so many different modules. Yes, there'll be the core ones you have to do as part of any qualifying law degree. But actually what you then have the opportunity to do is to do a wide range of different things depending on where your interests are as well. So I really enjoyed that, being able to do family law, being able to do my dissertation on the area that I did, criminology as well, all those ones as well. So yeah, I really enjoyed it and I've got a lot out of it. So I'll definitely do it if I have my time again.
Wonderful. That's quite encouraging. Would you agree, Tom?
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I would encourage anyone. I think what you said, Maria, about no one being certain at the age of 18, I think is something to really bear in mind, and you've made the decision in the kind of the best context that you had at the time to study law. And if when you're going through the motions of it, you're feeling like this isn't where I want to be, I guess that's where, us three, I guess, kind of were. And yeah, I'd say don't regret it because I think I've gained loads of skills. I mean, the two big things that come out for me are, as a social worker, you actually do spend, unfortunately, a good amount of time in court anyway. When situations get so serious for a child, we might have to seek a care order from the court to say that this child needs to be placed in foster care or with other family members. And that involves the social worker writing extensive legal documents, so statements and care plans and lots of detailed documents. So it means that what I gained from my law degree meant, well, I was actually really quite comfortable in the legal arena anyway, understanding this kind of process and who does what in the court room and what my barrister's role is, what the solicitor's role is. So there was already that kind of comfort there, which I think a lot of other social workers, my other peers, maybe didn't have. I would also say one memory that comes really clearly to me was that during one of these court hearings, I was cross-examined, and the feedback I had was, really positive, that I actually sort of really managed really well being cross-examined by the family's barrister, my barrister, the guardian's barrister. And I sort of thought about, well, this felt like a Cambridge law supervision, quite frankly. I kind of managed it all right, because it felt like a bit of a grilling. And, so that kind of gave me quite a lot of confidence in my position and what I've read and what I've understood, but also being able to say, well, yeah, I wasn't sure about that, but here's my thinking. I think being able to demonstrate your thinking is something that really came through from the law degree for me, which then takes me into like actually my direct work with children and families, like being able to understand those real complex ideas at a really high level about why we're doing a certain thing, why we're involved with you, why we're worried, but being able to explain it in really simple language for families that may not have English as their first language. That was quite common, or families where their level of education was just simply not the same, or they might have had learning needs and things like that. So yeah, my ability to take that really complex information into a really detailed, look at it in a really detailed way and be able to explain it quite simply, was something that I think the law degree gave me. And also, sort of when I was just listening to Andy there talking, I thought about the sort of strange overlap that I've done some training in what we call systemic social work. So it takes ideas from like systemic family therapy, and that's about trying to, I guess, take a step back and look at things in their broader context. And that's what the law degree, I think, really helped me with is, you take an individual incident or problem, and quite quickly you can kind of expand it and see about the wider difficulties or why we need the law to be a certain way to deal with that kind of more strategic idea. And yeah, in sort of systemic family therapy terms, there's actually a bit of overlap in terms of the way that your mind needs to think. So yeah, I haven't really thought about that until this conversation. So yeah, lots of skills. I would definitely recommend a law degree. Yeah.
That provoked me to think. I was actually definitely thinking when you were talking about grilling, supervisions were the first thing that came to my mind. Not quite sure if this is possible or not. But for those of you that might not know, supervisions are there's more group teaching that you've got here at Cambridge, and that will be yourself and 2 to 3 other people maybe from your college that also study law. As well as an academic, so an academic member of staff that teaches law. And you usually have to do an essay for them, and you usually have a topic that you have to have kind of thought about and written an essay about. But it's not an exam essay, so it's something that you bring to a supervision that you discuss with your sort of law peers and you discuss with the academic as well. And it's a way to kind of build up on your thinking. But it's what Tom was saying about it builds skills of analysis, it builds skills of resource. I would say kind of resource management in the way that you've got a lot of reading in a very short period of time, because you usually would have like a week and a half, you get lucky, to write a supervision essay. And I think that really teaches you to go through documents quickly, understand what is important, understand how to construct ideas and arguments from quite a massive amount of facts. So I suppose all of your kind of jobs have an aspect of that, but also other jobs might as well. So that's something that comes from a Cambridge law degree that is very much applicable to the full range of different things. So yeah, Tom?
Yeah, just to come back, obviously, I don't want to scare people about supervisions. I definitely found being in the witness box at court more terrifying, obviously, than being in a supervision. But I
Yes.
think exactly like you say, Maria, it kind of gives you that sort of a bit that confidence of just standing firm with your ideas and knowing that you've done the reading and that you have confidence in those ideas. So yeah, but I don't want people to be scared of supervisions.
It's all in jest. You can also have your coffee and your tea in the supervisions, maybe a little snack as well. Can't really have that in a corporate. So yeah, it's just more the skills you get from the supervisions. Don't come out of this thinking, gosh, I can't go to Cambridge because it's like a courtroom drama. It really isn't. What about you, Caroline?
Thank you. So I think the thing that's, I mean, Andy and Tom have given really excellent replies to this question, but the thing that is coming across to me, and it reminds me really strongly what I feel I took away, was huge amounts of intellectual confidence. And I don't feel phased by very much in terms of the world that I'm in intellectually. I feel like I'm going to be equal to it, because the phrase that I used to describe how I feel that we were educated at Cambridge as lawyers was like really well trained racehorses. It's so intense. It's an 8-week term. There's pressure. You're producing a lot of essays. I had friends at other excellent universities elsewhere, but they might do 2 or 3 essays a term. And we were doing, well, goodness, I think 3 a fortnight that I recall, or maybe it was more. But the amount of output was considerable. And it was, in a way you felt you were being kind of lashed along the race course, but it certainly does fine tune your thinking. So I think intellectual self-confidence is something that, nobody can ever take away from me. That doesn't mean that, if I was confronted with a problem to do with neuroscience, obviously I wouldn't feel that confident. But in the world that I'm in, it's been great for me. The other thing that I think is so important that I think all three of us have been privileged to learn is that precision of language. And Andy, you really referenced that. I think I write really carefully. I really craft. I obviously write emails, but I write articles. I might redraft a press release or something. I'm writing all the time. And I think people can often use language and I'm going to use a really horrid word, but a sloppy way, which makes the meaning very opaque and ambiguous. And I think that a Cambridge law education strips that away from you. You cannot be sloppy or ambiguous. So I think that's a really wonderful life skill. And the other thing is, I was just thinking last week, I had 3 contracts to read for different things. One was for a book, one was for a podcast sharing arrangement with one of my companies, and the third one, I can't remember. But I was feeling a bit sorry for myself, thinking, oh, 3 contracts. But actually, when I sat down and did it, it was really straightforward. And then just on contracts, although it's a long time since I did my contract law, we had a contract with a firm in America that tried to do the dirty on us. And I knew enough about implied contract in this country, looked up to see which state they were in, to see whether implied contract was a thing in their state in America. And it was. Got my lawyer onto it, and we got our money. And I know that this guy thought, oh, nice smiley woman over there in England, we'll do the dirty, she won't have any comeback. But thank you Cambridge, thank you law degree, got my money.
Amazing. Always love to hear that. Yeah, absolutely. You never know in which situations those kinds of skills would get through. And I think really that idea of confidence that all 3 panelists have kind of emphasized, it's incredible because sometimes in life, as Caroline was talking about, you have to stand up for yourself. There's not always somebody that is going to stand up for you. And that idea of, okay, I know what this is about and I understand this and I have confidence in my ideas, so fundamentally important. So would you maybe, if one of you if you've got any sort of ideas on this, would you still recommend a law degree to someone who knows they don't want to go into law then? Because we kind of generally talked about careers for people that do study law, but if somebody comes to you and they say, I don't want to go into law, but I'm interested in some of the aspects and skills that the law degree has, would you recommend they go ahead and do it, Andy?
Yeah, I think for me, if you're going to do that, I think just being really, really certain of actually what's involved with a law degree from that perspective. I think in terms of, if you look at in terms of some of the films around the study of law is very different to the reality. So, for example, if we were to look at in terms of Legally Blonde, for example, just in terms of the way that's sort of portrayed is very, very different to actually what the actual study of a law degree is, because in terms of if you're doing a sort of full law degree, there are certain modules you have no choice over doing in terms from that sense. So there are 7 sort of seen as sort of foundation subjects, which in terms of all law degrees will offer, because that's what's required for those who do want to go and practice law. So, for example, you have no choice about doing equity. I'll be honest, I hated equity. I literally, there was not a single part I can remember of equity where I thought, actually, I really enjoyed this. But I knew I had to do it as part of one of the 7. So I think just being really clear about what's being involved. I think just being really clear around not just the content, but also the process. So as has been said, there are a lot of essays and there is even more reading. And so I think if you're someone where you think actually the idea of sitting down and reading large amounts of material is not for me, then actually a law degree is probably not going to be the most enjoyable time, because you'll spend most of your time doing that reading as well. So as I said, I went into a law degree not expecting to go into practicing it, but I knew what I was going in for because I'd For me, I'd had a bit of a taste of it at A level. So again, just the content, the process from that sense. But most people who start a law degree haven't done any law before. So it's just getting that understanding of what will it be in practice. And there are various different intro books that you can read, which are aimed at sort of people who haven't done a law degree, just give you a flavour about what you might do around some of these different subjects, what's involved. If you do those and think, actually, yes, I'm really interested in some of these arguments, some of these sort of considerations, great, brilliant. If you look at it and think, actually, I find this all really boring and there's nothing that excites me, then you'd probably find it's sort of quite a challenging 3 years, I'd say.
Mhm. I'm just really quickly putting in the chat a link to an article on the faculty's Exploring Law blog, because Andy very rightly so mentioned books that you can read and that you can sort of consider if you are considering a law degree and you're not quite sure what it's about. So we've got a list of what we call super curriculars on our blog, which is things you can do to just explore the law and explore the legal field at year 12 or younger even, and kind of understand what it's about. And there's a section about books, but there's also a section about films and TV and podcasts and things. Not Legally Blonde, more kind of serious films and TV. Although I would definitely recommend Legally Blonde as well. But yeah, so if you want to consider that's in
And
there as well. Yes, Andy.
just say I'm not on commission at all, but I would really recommend What About Law. So that's one of the books listed on there, and I read that when I was considering applying. Letters to a Law Student. Again, they're two really good books which give a really honest reflection around what some of the sort of is involved as well. So I definitely suggest having a look at those. And you don't have to buy them; you can go look into if your library's got them, etc. But they're really
Yeah.
useful.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Those are the people that like them. A lot of school libraries actually have them now, which is really quite useful. Okay, so yeah, so we've talked about kind of doing considering law, but not wanting to go into a legal career. So I suppose kind of finishing off the more kind of panel discussion for today before we go into questions. And I suppose I'll go to all of you again, is what would be one piece of advice you give to someone considering their career options? So perhaps let's say somebody that is studying law now, who's considering the career options, and perhaps even somebody who might be on the legal pathway. So, maybe you're like Caroline and you kind of started your kind of bar training. What would you get and that person wants to change that career? What is one piece of advice you would give them? Maybe starting with Caroline this time.
Thank you. It's very simple. I would say be true to yourself. You can, as far as I'm concerned, there's only one life. This isn't a dress rehearsal. Don't live out other people's expectations of you, parental or social or whatever it might be, and you will do best at what you love and you care about. And I think Tom, Andy, and I are very, very blessed, and I think you are too. That we love what we do, and that means that you will do well at it. So, unto thine own self be true, I think is my best bit of advice.
Wonderful. What would you say, Tom?
I would agree with Caroline. I think I'd add to that and kind of speaking from kind of personal experience, I guess, is it's not the one that you decide to go for now is not necessarily going to be your career for life either. You can change at a later date. I think a lot of pressure is put on ourselves, and whether it's social, parental, the university, even whatever it is, that to have a sense that you are stepping into something and you are going to do it forever and you'll be happy with it. I stepped into being a social worker thinking this is just good life experience and I could use this again for my law degree. And I think I had a sense of, I don't want to waste my law degree on something else. But then I sort of slowly learned that I'm not at all. So, but there's options for me now. Now with the law degree and my social work background, I'm now working in safeguarding in higher education. So I could go on to something else if I decide to at some point. So yeah, my advice is don't see it as the be all and end all. Yeah.
Yeah, and just building on what Tom was saying about options, I think exploring those options, I think one of the real strengths of studying at Cambridge is whether you do a law degree or you don't do a law degree, there are lots of opportunities to hear from, to speak from, to meet people who have done and are going on to do really amazing things in a whole range of different sort of sectors. So I think in terms of, you'll find that there's a university law society, most colleges will have a law society. They have people who are members who are studying law, and then they've got people who are not studying law but have got an interest in becoming lawyers in the future. I went to a number of those as part of my exploration to see, actually, is this of interest? Just chatting to people at the various events, whether it's dinner, whether it's drinks from that perspective, whether it's socials, just to sort of really get a sense of what is it like, what's their experiences, what are they doing, see does it interest me as well. And I think in terms of that's something that's really readily available at Cambridge, and I think is a real blessing, because you have so many people who've gone on to do brilliant stuff on the back of their law degree, who want to give back and share their experiences as well, much like we're doing now, sharing our time for those who might want to be coming and doing it in the future. So I think making the most of that. I think the other one is linked to what was being said already, is actually not being worried if the path you're going down is very different to others. I think if I look at my friendship group, even amongst those who did law, they've gone onto a wide variety of fields. Some have gone into academia, some have gone into practicing law, others have gone into sort of wider sort of business, commercial, entrepreneurship. There's a whole range of different pathways. And so I think law in some ways is quite helpful in that respect, in that, in terms of, it's not like you're doing a medicine degree where 90% of people will probably go on to become a doctor from that sense. I think in law it is much more fluid as to which routes people go, as well, and also similarly people who are not doing law ending up practicing. I know that's one of the questions that's come up, which we'll no doubt get to in a second.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yes, I suppose to recapitulate everything that the panelists have said, be yourself, try different things out, and options change. You don't have to do the job that you're doing right now for the rest of your life. You don't have to do the first job you do after university for the rest of your life. And I think all of our panelists are wonderful sort of evidence of that you can change your mind and you can still keep the skills and the experiences that you've got and the interests and just apply them to different things. So that's wonderful. So if I get to the pre-submitted questions first, and then maybe to the live ones, one question that is being asked quite a lot, both pre-submitted and live, is law degrees with other degrees. So doing a law degree with politics or language or history. I think people mentioned different things. Maybe I think the more relevant of you will probably be Caroline, actually, who started with a language. But yeah, if anybody else also has kind of insights from people they know, please do offer them as well. But Caroline, obviously you switched from languages to a law degree. Would you feel like that was useful doing that combination? And could you maybe talk about whether you think it'd be useful to just, kind of continue through that? So some universities would offer law and the language as a kind of full degree. Would you recommend that to people?
I would definitely recommend it. I think it's wonderful. It's so complimentary, and also it sounds a bit naughty, but it means that I can say in all truthfulness, I read languages at Cambridge in a particular audience. In another audience, I can say I read law at Cambridge. So, you can swing it both ways.
Wonderful.
Just,
Yeah.
just,
Oh, sorry,
just
Emma,
say,
go
I
on.
had a couple of friends who did various routes. Just checking where my understanding is correct still, that you can't apply to do both like two subjects at the same time. So some universities,
That's
as
at
you
Cambridge
mentioned,
now.
you could do law and politics, law and French, etc. At Cambridge you can't. So you do the route that Caroline did, where you do something else for a couple of years and then switch into law. So what that does mean, and one consideration is, if you're interested in the legal side, the sort of part of law that you will study, the amount of different modules you can do is reduced, because the amount of time you're studying. So what you'll probably find is, if you want to keep the option of practicing law more readily available to you, then you'd find yourself doing sort of the core conventional modules that have to be done from as part of that, rather than that sort of that wider flexibility that some of us have talked about already, being able to do that. So that is one of the trade-offs, is that you wouldn't have so much choice as to which law you study. You'd do probably the 7 core from that perspective. And I think I've had a quick look, you get 3 options, whereas you'd get more options if you do a sort of full law degree. So that's just one of the considerations, but I can absolutely see the benefits that Caroline's outlined as well.
Absolutely. I mean, so something that fell on the radiator, although no one's here. Interesting. So yeah, so what I was going to say is also at Cambridge, and I imagine at other universities as well, you're actually allowed to do quite a lot of things in other subjects, or you're not allowed to obviously take exams or have a degree in those subjects. Oftentimes you can sit in lectures for other subjects. So I know when I was doing my undergraduate degree, I did an archaeology degree, and I sat in on politics lectures because I just found them interesting and I thought they were kind of relevant to what I was doing. Or different subjects will also have societies, so like politics society or economic society, and that's actually really recommended because you get in touch on those subjects and look at kind of their career paths and whatnot without necessarily doing that subject. So if you're worried that, oh, law degree at Cambridge, I'm not going to be able to do anything else, that's absolutely not the case. There's lots of opportunities to get involved with other things. So yeah, absolutely do like what am I trying to say? Explore that. Okay, so another really good question is academia. Can I go into academia with a law degree? Is a law degree used for academia? And if it is it useful preparation? Now, I know none of you are in academia, but if anybody has any kind of friends or people they know that have gone into it and can kind of provide some perspective, maybe that might be good. Thinking. Andy?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick off. So yeah, so someone who's on my course at Trinity Hall has gone on to academia from that perspective as well. And again, I think doing the variety of modules that you do at Cambridge during a law degree, you then discover topics that you may not have considered that you would actually be really passionate about. So I think from that respect, I think in terms of the door is open to academia alongside any other sort of course that you were doing, because you study such a range of things within a law degree. So I think that's an option from that perspective. I think going into academia, I think again you have to be certain around the funding side of it, because in terms of, for those of you who are who are here from England, in terms of funding for undergraduate is very, very different to funding for postgraduate. And that funding postgraduate study can be a challenge, but that's the same for most postgraduate courses from that respect. But no, I do know people who've done law who've gone into academia. I've known people who've done English, history, sciences, etc., who've gone in as well. So there's definitely ways in from that route.
Absolutely. I mean, the entire faculty of law at Cambridge is made up of people that have gone into legal academia. There's a lot of them here, so it's definitely definitely a route that you can follow. Okay, so I'll throw it to Tom now. Just to ask, how did you know your career was for you? Hopefully, you still believe it's for you. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, great question. I mean, yeah, context is I did step away from being in, children's services, local authority social worker into something slightly different about 18 months ago. But that isn't to say that it's not for me. I think just because given the nature of the work and the kind of the systems of the minute, I definitely personally needed a bit of a step back from my own kind of mental and emotional well-being, in dealing what we deal with it in children's services. How did I know it was for me? I think I'm quite an extroverted person. I enjoy working directly with people. I think that's always something I knew that I wanted to do. And I really loved the range of people I got to meet. I worked with some wonderful families who were in some really challenging circumstances, but I really enjoyed some of the golden moments in social work, and that give you that kind of, we joke about a warm fuzzy feeling, but it was nice to be in a job that was kind of fundamentally good and necessary and essential for a functioning, safe society, for the well-being of children and families. So yeah, I knew it was for me because I think it chimed with a lot of my internal values, some personal life experiences. There was really good, high levels of autonomy as a social worker. It's up to you about how you build those relationships and how you kind of do your assessments and what interventions you put in place to create changes. So I really enjoyed that autonomy there. And yeah, I think, just I knew it was for me when the range of stories and moments I could take away from it, that some of them not so great, some of them would blow your mind, and others were wonderful golden moments. So yeah, I think I just enjoyed the working with a range of just people in society and learning their experiences. And I feel like it sounds a bit cliche, but it's helped me learn a lot about myself and my own life experiences as well. So yeah, I feel very proud and privileged to have done the job that I did. Yeah.
Wonderful. That's what you want to hear. One last question maybe, and I suppose it is, can people go into diplomacy or politics with the law degree? But I'll switch it around a little bit as well to say, do people have to have a law degree to go into diplomacy or politics? Because I feel like oftentimes you hear of people kind of higher up working with sort of MP or the civil service or whatnot. And the law degree is actually really common. A lot of history and degrees are very common in that group of people. Can you go into those professions with a law degree? Do you have to have a law degree to go into those professions? Anybody who's kind of feeling confident talking on that. Andy and Caroline then.
Caroline's mic went off first. I'll let Caroline go first. I'm happy to jump in afterwards.
Well, I think a lot
Caroline?
of people will say there are far too many lawyers in Parliament. So, and I think I probably agree with that. I think I think, what Tom and Andy do will be so interesting to have represented in the House of Commons and the House of Lords. So too many lawyers, I'd say. But I think it's not a coincidence. I think, I talked about the confidence that a Cambridge Law degree gives you. It does give you that self-belief that, you can stand up, make your case and argue for yourself. So, I mean, that's what politics is roughly all about, isn't it? That you put yourself forward and you feel like you've got something to offer. So I don't think it's a coincidence. In terms of the Foreign Office, I think the Foreign Office, from what I understand, is very open to what people have read at university. And I know that they're looking for people who are, fascinated and excited by the world and are going to bring something to the role of British diplomacy. So I don't know that I would say that again that law is a requirement, but it's possible that it gives you that intellectual confidence, which is what they're seeking. Because you wouldn't want to be a diplomat if you were a very shy and retiring person, because it probably wouldn't suit your personality. And I think, maybe it becomes self-determining, is that people who are quite self-confident apply to do law, and then the doing the law makes you more self-confident. I hope that makes sense. But I can see why those two professions would be attractive to people who have read law at Cambridge. So then, you end up with critical mass.
Absolutely.
Just to add, obviously, a lot of my role is dealing within politics, and I think in terms of, again, a law degree has given me a lot of skills which are proving very, very useful in terms of just that preciseness of how you frame your arguments, and also thinking, what are the likely counter arguments going to be that I'm going to encounter as I go through from that perspective? What am I looking for when I'm scouring through these policy documents? What is there? What's not there? So I think that definitely helps. Definitely don't think it's a requirement. I think there's lots of people who go into politics. For example, languages, I think particularly around diplomacy, I think languages can be particularly beneficial as well, because we live in a truly global world. And actually, if you have those language skills in terms of whether it's the specific language you speak or just the ability to be able to pick up languages or bits quicker, can massively help as well. But I think a lot of, if you're wanting to get into politics, I think sometimes the experiences you can get alongside your degree are just as valuable as the actual content of the degree you did. I think if I look at a lot of people who've got into political roles in political parties, for example, lots of them have got involved in their local parties, have got involved in sort of policy groups from that side, to give them experience within that party to then help them internally. I think if you want to get into a role like mine, I think you absolutely don't have to have a particular degree. It's just the skills you get. So if I look at those who work across policy, when I look at their LinkedIn and things, there's a whole range of different subjects that they've studied as well. So I think you get a lot of skills that will benefit you, but it's not a requirement.
Can I just add one more thing? Sorry, Tom, I'm not cutting across you, but I think you made a really good point about counter arguments, Andy. It's really interesting to say that you're not fazed by them. And I hadn't really thought about that, but I'm never offended in business or particularly in my personal life if somebody disagrees with me, because I feel equal to be able to counter what they've said. It's not a personal thing, it's an intellectual thing. And I think that's a great thing to be able to carry through life, because some people feel very undermined if they're in a context where somebody disagrees with them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very, very, very important. I think any kind of applies to everybody, doesn't it? Like whatever professional thing you do, you're always going to have disagreements. You're going to have disagreements in your personal life. So that's a really cool skill you get out of the law degree, I think. All right, so I think I might just finish it at this point just because people will be wanting to go to dinner. So a massive, massive thank you to our panelists for taking time out of their really busy schedules to come and talk to you, show you all the different pathways that you can do having done a law degree, the skills and experiences and interests you get from a law degree that you can apply to different things, and maybe give a little bit of encouragement as well about if you're a law student, you're feeling a little bit stressed, or maybe you are in the beginning of your legal career and you're thinking about switching. That is completely okay. People can go on to do a range of different things, and your law degree is absolutely not wasted if you choose to do something different. And also a massive thank you from me because this marks the end of the Exploring Legal Futures webinars for 2025. Thank you so much if you've attended one or all 8 of them. I hope that you have found them useful and I hope that you have found them informative. We're very, very grateful that you took time to come and listen to us. If you do want to watch the recordings of the webinars back, you can absolutely do that on the Exploring Legal Futures webinars page, which I have hopefully put in the chat box now, and they will also be on the Faculty of Law YouTube channel. I will also put my email address on the chat box as well for you to see. And if you've got any questions after the session, be it about the session specific or any other sessions from the Exploring Legal Futures webinars, please do feel free to reach out and I will be very, very happy to answer any of your questions. But apart from that, I hope that I can see you in one of our future events, and I wish you all the best with your law applications or your legal career. All the best from the panelists, from me and the faculty, and yeah, have a lovely rest of your week as well. Bye.
Bye.